Thank you very much for being here. My name is Mike Butterworth. I'm the director of the Center for Sports Communication and Media, a new center in the Moody College of Communication here at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'm proud to say that this marks a sort of debut of sorts for us. We've been around since the fall, working on some various projects, doing some exciting things, but this is our first chance after having launched a new website and new Twitter feed and Facebook identity and all of those good things to be able to sponsor an event as well. And I'm really proud that Dr. Adam Earnhardt is our first guest. So I will say only a little bit about our center, and the website is right here that also promotes Dr. Earnhardt's talk. And I encourage you to check out what we're doing in the Center for Sports Communication and Media and look for more opportunities and events really soon. Quick thank you to Chris Hart, who's our program manager in the center, for doing so much to help get this set up for today, as well as our good folks in the Moody College who are taking care of the photography and video. So we're delighted to have you here. Dr. Adam Earnhardt is a professor and chair in the Department of Communication at Youngstown State University up in Ohio, and he's a little disappointed that we don't have some better Austin weather, but it's still 50 degrees warmer than it is in Northeast Ohio. So that's a good thing. Dr. Earnhardt's specialization is in sports communication broadly, and especially talking about fan identity and fan communities. Also does a lot of work with social media. He is currently in the middle of co-editing a project called the ESPN After Effect with two other colleagues. This is a follow-up to their book that came out in 2015 called the ESPN Effect. He's also co-edited with a couple of different colleagues 2 volumes on sports fandom, which he conveniently has with him right now, and I encourage you to take a look afterwards. Dr. Earnhardt, you can tell already, and if you look at this picture, I've never seen a better example of somebody whose picture matches up with their personality. He's every bit as happy and outgoing and friendly as the picture would suggest. He's also a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and so I'm curious to find out how he negotiated the tension of rooting for his nemesis or his cross-state rival in the Super Bowl yesterday, perhaps. That will enter into the talk. But it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, and welcome to Dr. Adam Earnhardt.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So actually a very funny story about that picture. I was actually very angry that day. and I needed a headshot for something. I forget what it was. And this is our backyard, and we have 4 kids. And my wife said, and every picture was like I had a scowl on my face or something. And my wife got up in the trampoline and started jumping up and down in the trampoline. and like, how could I not laugh at that? You know, my wife is jumping in the trampoline, and as soon as she did that, like, I just lit up, and click, click, click. There's my headshot. There you go. That was like 20 pounds ago too, so I really like using that picture. So thanks for having me here. I love Texas, and there's a very good reason why I love Texas. I was actually born here, 1970, in a little Army hospital up in Killeen, and we lived there for 3 years. And so part of this trip for me is actually like coming home, So I'm actually going to Killeen on Thursday to see home. Like, I'm going to see where I lived for 3 years. I've never been back, so this should be pretty exciting. Yeah. So I'm kind of pumped about that. But this is a really crazy time to be talking about this stuff, right? I mean, based on what happened yesterday, what's going on this week with the Olympics, I mean, this is a really cool time to be talking about this. And if you can't tell, okay, so you're not going to be able to tell this, but I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm still wired, right? And I only slept for like 3 hours because I watched the whole game, I watched all the after stuff, I had to watch This Is Us, and so I did all that, right? Did all that, still got up, got on a plane, came down here, and I'm still wired, right? That's what sports does for me. Now, I'm going to say that, and then I'm also going to follow it up by saying I am not a huge sports fan. Now, that usually throws people off a little bit. Yeah, I'm a Steelers fan, Pirates, Penguins, also a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, which causes some problems. We'll talk about that later. But I am not a junkie. right? How many of you are like sports junkies? You wake up in the morning, Sports Center is on, thank you. There's always one or two, yeah. You know the stats, you know the players, you know this, you know that. I'm not that guy. And I tried to be for a long time. In college, all my buddies, they were playing all the fantasy baseball stuff, and I was trying to get into that. I did play fantasy football. I sucked, but I tried. They were really into it. I wasn't. But what I was fascinated by later on was the people who were cheering for sports, right? The fans. And I didn't realize this, but my love for fandom actually started way back in high school. Now, I don't know if you can tell this or not from where you're sitting, but I'm 6'8". 6'8", 290 pounds, depending on the day. And I was 220 pounds when I played college basketball. But when I was in high school, I went to a very small private school. You know, we were okay in basketball, but we weren't great. And but there were people who were starting to wanted to see me play, like colleges, small colleges. I didn't, nothing big. So D3 kind of colleges. And my mom, we didn't have anybody on staff there to take videos of me playing basketball. So my mom would sit there with the camcorder, the big, camcorder like this big, and take videos of me going up and down the court, right? And so we would put those videos together, and if a college would ask for it, if a coach would ask for it, we'd send it out. Right? So a couple colleges made a couple offers, only because I was 6'8", because I had zero ability to play basketball. And one of them was in Rochester, New York. And so we drove all the way from Pittsburgh to Rochester and met this guy. He blew past me, this coach blew past me. He says, "I don't want to see you, I want to see her." Pointed right to my mom. I'm like, oh my God, this is embarrassing, right? What did my mom do, right? He says, "I want you here, if we can get you here for every game, I want you here for every one of your son's games. Because I've never heard someone cheer that loud on, I didn't realize this, but he turned the volume up whenever he was watching my tape, and my mom's going, woo, 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 in the background the whole time, cheering us on. Never even thought about that. That's really where I started, I'm like, oh my God, this is fascinating. Somebody's really interested in, a fan's reaction, because that's just as important to the game as the players sometimes themselves, right? So, fast forward, I did my dissertation, focused just on sports fans and their reactions to athletes, wrote a couple books, got very excited about sports fans, and then I started to have kids. And I thought, here's my petri dish, right? Here's my lab experiments, right? I can test out all of these things about sports fans and watch them grow up into sports fans. And then something crazy happened. So I have 3 daughters and a son. So my kids are 12, 10, 7, and 5. And I can say that and you wouldn't know any better anyways, but let's say this was it. Because if my wife was here, she's like, no, it's 13. No, okay. So 12, 10, 7, and 5. 12-year-old, okay, so there's this thing that we do in the Earnheardt house where we'll take, if you reach 6 or 7 years old, you get to go to your first Steelers game with Dad, right? And we sit up in the cheap seats and, we took the 12-year-old, Ella, kind of okay. She liked the hot chocolate stuff and, popcorn and all that. But, other than that, that was it, right? I think we left at halftime, which was really hard for me. 10-year-old, and we won too. 10-year-old, took her to a game a couple years ago, and we get there, and it's really cold, but she's braving it because she's with Dad. She wants to show Dad that she can be a fan, So about halfway through the third quarter, we were winning, and I said, "You're really cold, aren't you? You want to go?" Yeah. She's, "Yeah, I really want to go." So we got a hot chocolate, we got out of there, right? And we won. We were playing the Bills, I think. We won. Then this happened this year. So how do I get this to, oh, here we go. So can I switch over with?
So are you on the laptop?
Oh. Anyhow, there's a picture, I'll let him mess around with it. There's a picture of my daughter and I, my 7-year-old daughter, at a Steelers game. Now, the reason why this is important is because she was excited the entire time she was there. I mean, start to finish. And it was weird because I saw my first two kids kind of like this, I'm apathetic about it, but I'm going to go because Dad wants me to go. And then it got to with Sadie, my 7-year-old. Not only did she want to go, she wanted to experience everything, and she had questions about everything, questions that only a 7-year-old would ask about being in a stadium, like, "Hey, Dad, what's that green dragon on the sideline?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, that green dragon that's flying up and down the sideline." I'm like, I'm like looking, because we're way up, and I'm like, is there a math? And by the way, we were playing the Jaguars, right? So we're playing the Jags, and we're way up, and I'm like, there's no way that the Jags have a dragon for a mascot, but okay. And here she was talking, and it was raining, and so she was talking about the camera that was on the sideline that was covered in green, like tarp, right? And it was moving up and down the sidelines. I'm like, how did you pick that out? Like, that's the thing that you picked out that you had a question about. And it just really amazed me. Like, and then she asked a question about, well, what are the orange things for, the down markers, And it has an X on the down marker, and the X means that's where you have to get to, or something like, So I'm explaining all these, and I'm having conversations with her that I didn't have with the other two, because she was really into it. And that excited me. So, by the way, so here's the clincher about that is, so we lost. Roethlisberger throws 5 interceptions. I mean, it was like the worst game ever, right? In terms of the actual football play on the field. It started to rain, and it was raining hard. And I didn't come prepared with ponchos or anything, right? And I said, about the end of the third quarter, I'm like, "You want to go? We can go." "No, I want to stay. We're going to stay until that clock says 0, is what she said. And I'm like, okay, let's do this, right? Then we get home. So we lost, the Steelers lost. And mind you, with the other two girls, they had won. We get home, we get in there, and it immediately started. Ella and Kate, the two older girls, said, "Ha ha, you went with Dad and they lost," right? And Sadie said, "Oh no, you guys aren't real fans." I'm like, there's this debate happening now, right? "You aren't real fans." "Oh yeah, we are. We went with Dad. We went to a game." "Yeah, but you didn't stay for the whole game. If you were a real fan, you would have stayed for the whole game." "I'm a real fan. I'm the only real fan because I stayed for the whole game even though they lost." And they're like, "Oh." And it was the first time I'd ever seen my 7-year-old best my 12 and 10-year-old in an argument. They turned around and walked away like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," right? And so from that point on, now I ask her what she wants to be when she grows up. We talk about things that she's excited about. She's talking about wanting to be a referee, right? She's talking about wanting to be a coach, right? And no other sport, just football, right? That to me is very exciting. There she is. Oh, is that what you were laughing about? Sorry, there you go. Yeah, so there we are, high above Heinz Field, getting our butts kicked by the Jaguars. And so that's kind of, it's just a real quick story about how I got into this and how it's basically, we were talking about this earlier, how it's kind of taken over my life, right? I mean, this whole idea of, and now I get random calls from journalists who will say, "Hey, do you have any thoughts about, LeBron James doing this, blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts about that," but they all kind of center back on the fans, and so we talk about that. Look, we have been sports fans for centuries, and we've encouraged this idea of sports fans for centuries. All the way back in Greece, the modern, or not the modern Olympiad, but the first Olympiad, we were bringing people together from tribes, from provinces, to celebrate sports, to celebrate their finest athletes, right? And so we did it there. And then obviously the Roman Colosseum, which I talk about quite a bit, where in Rome they put on all of these games just for the fans, right? Sure, they were showing off their gladiators and so on, but they were doing that for the fans to curry favor with politicians and with people in other provinces, other leaders. And so these were really the first fans, if you think about it. And I was reading a piece probably about a year ago where it goes back, you can date this back even into early China, where they did this very similar things like the Olympics in China, where they brought fans, groups of people, we didn't call them fans back then obviously, but community members together to celebrate through sport. And that was very important. But here's the crazy part. We as a discipline, and this is what I told you we were going to talk about later, as a discipline, we're new. And especially if you look specifically at sport communication. And this is because the universities, the ivory towers, kind of treated us like a hobby, right? So sports, that's not a real science. That's not something you'd really study, right? And it wasn't until Jeffrey Goldstein's book, and actually this is the cover of the second edition of Sports, Games, and Play, and we were talking about Larry Wenner earlier, Media, Sports, and Society, this edited book. These two books were very influential to me and very influential to a lot of our colleagues in sport and communication because they kind of said, hey, this is a legitimate thing to study, right? Not just sports fans, but everything about sports and how communication permeates all of that, right? And so I think I still have a copy. I might even have a copy of this book with me. But this book has been beat up so badly over the years because I just use it all the time. And I think I left it back at the hotel. But it's the Media, Sports, and Society. It's so rich and so full of information. And it's even though it was 1970, 1980 something, 85, 89. So we're talking a couple decades ago. Stuff is still relevant today. So we can still apply what Larry Wenner and the chapter authors were talking about back then. So a little bit about why we study sports fans. And there's lots of reasons why. But let's talk about first why we are sports fans. I mean, there's motivations for us to be sports fans. There's reasons why we do watch SportsCenter first thing in the morning, click it on. Or the very first thing that I do sometimes in the morning, I'll wake up and I'll open up the ESPN app and check scores for my favorite teams, right? In case I fell asleep early that night or whatever. We do that because we want to know. We want the information. That's a motivation. We'll get into that in a second. But one of the motivations that I was seeing last night play out. And you saw this in fans, and when they would do breakaways, and you'd see fans in Philadelphia and New England, the reactions that they were getting from people was this kind of excited stress, this kind of what we call euphoric stress, which is actually a good kind of stress. And this term euphoric stress or eustress was actually coined by this guy here, Hans Selye. Now, Hans Selye was a pioneer in this field. He was an endocrinologist, but he basically said, look, not all stress is bad. How many of you like scary movies? Hey, do you like scary movies? I don't know if you even know what that's from. Anybody know what that's from? Scream, thank you. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of weird whenever it comes to old scary movies, but yeah, that's I know it is. That's what my kids said the other. I'm like, it's not an old movie. Like, yeah. So that's what eustress is. That's a euphoric stress, right? Because you're sitting there, you know something bad's going to happen, but you're watching anyway, not turning away. Now, the same thing happens in sports, right? It's 4th and goal. They're going to go for it. I can't believe they're going to go for it. You're probably sitting there saying that last night, like, are you really going to go for it on 4th and goal? And they did, but could you imagine the Eagles fans in that moment like this? I'm done. I can't look. I can't look. I got to leave the room. That's my mom, by the way. My mom, anytime a Steelers game is on and it's really close, doesn't matter. Like, she'll leave. How many people are, because they can't handle that stress. But it's actually good for us. So that euphoric stress is something that we celebrate, that we know that people watch because they want to be excited about that, right? It's like reality TV. You don't know what's going to happen from minute to minute, right? The best in unscripted reality TV. That's what sports is, right? So that's old Hans. We watch to learn, right? We are fans because we want to learn about sports. In many ways, we're learning from a very early age, sometimes before we even know that we are sports fans, right? So we're watching other people play sports. Our parents are encouraging us to play. This is one of my favorite pictures, but like, because this reminds me of every little league team I've ever coached, right? Yes, like, go get it, whoa! They all kind of run for the ball, right? But we learn about sports, and that's why we want to watch. We want to consume more of it because we want to know what happens, and we want to be able to talk about it and share that information with other people, right? Did you see what so-and-so did last night? Did you see that great play? By the way, anybody, and it's just kind of a side note, but all of the record-breaking numbers from last night's game, like, mind-boggling, and the Patriots still lost. Like, I mean, it's just crazy, right? But that's what, you heard a lot of people talking about that today because but you knew that information if you were watching the game. And so fans watch because they want to learn, right? Sometimes we actually want to learn how to play. Now, I don't know if any of you did this as kids, but how many of you tried to imitate your favorite player, your favorite athlete? Yeah? Who did you try to imitate? Jordan, right?
Yeah, playing Nerf and just sticking out our tongues.
Be like Mike, and you go to jump from the foul line to dunk it, and you make it about 2 feet, right? Yeah, with the tongue hanging out, right? Who else? Yeah.
Well, Jeff can baseball.
Yeah, baseball, right?
David Beckham at soccer.
Did you bend it like Beckham?
I tried.
Yeah, all right.
Roger Federer's Queen.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's great. Yeah.
I used to call myself a chubby Middle Eastern Kobe Bryant.
Nice.
I was not I was chubby Middle Eastern, but I wasn't.
What was? Oh my God, that's great. Because that's the same. I mean, okay. I don't know. I'm really going to date myself too. So if any of you don't know who this is, you're okay. You're off the hook. But Bill Laimbeer. All right. So Bill Laimbeer. I was kind of a Pistons fan for a while, but I was always the tall guy on the team, right? So and I don't know if you know this, but he had this really weird 3-point shot, right? He'd go like this, like that's how he shot it. And I always tried to do that, and my coach was like, "Stop doing that, please. I mean, you're not Bill Laimbeer," because I clearly did not. But that's what we try to do. We try to imitate the athletes that we really like, that we watch. And I grew up in Pittsburgh in the '70s, so we were always trying to do the immaculate reception, Franco Harris's immaculate reception. Did he catch it? Didn't he catch it? Kind of thing. Did it hit the turf? Did it not? That kind of. So we always, were trying to do that kind of stuff all the time. But the Michael Jordan one, oh my God, all the time, sticking our tongues out. All right, next one. This is a shot from last night. This is in the middle of Philadelphia, obviously. Cars being overturned, stuff blowing up in the background. A little bit of looting. Not nearly as bad as Boston in 2008 or LA in 2009. Not as bad as Vancouver when they lost, actually, which is a whole other side story. But still, some things happened. But still, there was a lot of really, good celebrations going on, right? Were there many celebrations around Austin for Philadelphia?
Really, I FaceTimed my family.
Oh, nice.
Tears involved there.
Oh, yay!
My dad was crying. He's been waiting
Oh!
my whole life for this moment.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome. Yay! Well, tell your dad if he sees this later, make sure he sees this and we talked about him. And you told the world that he was crying. No, that's okay. No, that's great. That's great. That's how a lot of people felt, though. And, it reminded me a lot of when Cleveland Cavaliers, when they won the NBA championship. Game 7, I mean, was it Game 7? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Game 7, like, this is the 3 a.m. thing's kicking in now. But yeah, Game 7, it was crazy. And there were people who were sobbing, like, finally, like, Cleveland's finally won something, And there was a lot of that going on. And a lot of that is, very similar to what happened in Philadelphia last night. Yeah. Look, this is a big reason why we do this is to feel this sense of community, right? We become fans with other people because it makes us feel like we're part of something. And when that something that we're part of is success, it amplifies your fanship like a million times. Yes. Yeah. Right. So, when you're that when you're that excited about it, right? Go out, scream and yell, cheer on your face. Did you say "Go Dogs"?
Yeah, that was just a snarky comment of my friend and colleague, Dr. Dublin.
Ah, nice.
I'm a fan.
Oh, okay, all right. Nice, all right. But that's what we do. It makes us feel like we're a part of something, right? When we can say that we're successful, when we've won, we're part of something, then we go out and we tell the world about it, right? So that's what they're doing, telling the world about it. There are some great, by the way, if you want to like Google any of this and watch some of the videos from last night, some of them are a little alarming, but some of them are really cool too. So on Thursday, I'm heading up to Killeen, I told you. I'm actually taking a side trip over to Waco. I'm going to meet with a woman who is the #1 Dallas Cowboys fan. Now, obviously, I can put that on my Twitter account and on Facebook and say, I'm the #1 Steelers fan. She actually has the proof. Like, she has, like, third-party verification. She's definitely the real deal, right? She's in the Professional Football Hall of Fame. It's a thing. Check it out. It's been around since the 90s. She's the real deal. She's actually turned this into a side business. But, her entire identity is wrapped up into the Dallas Cowboys. Successes, failures, all of that, right? And she loves it so much that, her house is Dallas Cowboys, her like I said, her side business, she goes to all the games, spends lots of money, right? Think about all the income that you have that, that could be going to buying merchandise for that team, tickets, access, things like that. And we see this a lot with professional football teams that have a lot of success, right? So, and other leagues too. So, but even teams that, like the Cubs, until they had won the championship, right? Mike's a big Cubs fan. So if after a while, if there's not a winning season or several winning seasons go by, so you have several losing seasons, people start to get a little grumpy, is the best term for that. We see this a lot in Cleveland, where we have a parade when the Browns go 0-16, or with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who there was a petition that was started that garnered 60,000 signatures to have Major League Baseball force the owner to sell the team because he was basically cleaning house, got rid of Andrew McCutchen, and basically, right? So you have fans who will kind of revolt and say, no, this is bad. I don't want because my identity is wrapped up into this. I don't want this to go away, and that's very important. We go for social connections. We go to be with people, and one of the things that we like to do is dress up, tailgate, have a party. There's a motivation to entertain and be entertained. The whole idea of tailgating is there's books written about tailgating and beer and everything else that are just it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we studied. But the Green Bay fans are kind of a unique set of fans. Why? Does anybody know? You're right. They own the team. right? So I actually worked with a guy who just retired at Youngstown State who owns a small stake in the Green Bay Packers, and he wears Packers stuff to work every day. Very proud Packers owner, but he says, I'm a fan first. I'm an owner, but yeah, I'm a fan first. So that's kind of important. So different kind of motivation for them, right? Maybe not at the same level as like a Mark Cuban kind of owner, right, for the Mavs, right? Yeah, but similar. You know, can I ask, how many of you were fans of your high school teams? Okay. How many of you are fans of your college team? So a few more hands go up. You know, I like to say that this is really where we kind of learn to become fans. I mean, yeah, our parents teach us, but really it's that whenever we don't want to be like our parents and we kind of separate ourselves from our parents and we get around other groups of people. Here, this is the Georgetown Hoyas, right? So this is at a basketball game. I think these guys, they were playing Pitt. So this is a couple years ago. Probably back when the Big East was still the Big East with, you know, anyhow. So, but this idea of like when we get into that college setting, it's almost like this idea of fanship, especially if you're at a university where you have a very successful sports program. Even if it's just one team, even if just football is good, or even if just basketball is good, right? Like UConn women's basketball is really good, right? They have a huge following. I mean, they get quite a few people there for their games. You know, almost as many as the men, I think. I've seen it packed for both men's and women's games. And so when you've got that kind of passion, and you want to kind of associate yourself with other people around you that are similar age, you're kind of in the same situation educationally, you adopt all those kind of manners. So it's like we almost adopt fan mannerisms from the people around us in that setting. So being in college is kind of a different kind of motivation for why we become fans. Another reason why we watch sports or become fans is because of the beauty of sports, the aesthetics. This is important because, okay, Tom Brady may have beautiful hair, right? Tom Brady might have a great body. I don't know. I've never really seen him without the stuff on, so. But I've seen him with his hair. He's got good hair, and this is coming from a bald guy, right? So I'll say that. But aesthetics, yes, we could be talking about that, but we could also be talking about the beauty of the game, the beauty of the athletic move, right? The plays that he makes are beautiful. You don't have to like Tom Brady to agree or disagree with that, or to agree with that. It is true. There are a lot of players out there who are just beautiful to watch. Floyd Mayweather, right, might be a despicable human being, right? I'm not saying whether he is or not. He might be. If he is, doesn't mean that whenever he's in the ring, it's not beautiful to watch, right? And and by the way, aesthetics goes well beyond, you know, the aggressive football and boxing, right? There's a study that came out in I think it's Communication Research Reports, which are just very short studies, but this one came out about 10, 15 years ago, and they found a difference between the reasons why men, or what sports men and women were watching. And women were watching ice skating, and their main motivation for watching ice skating was the beauty of it, right? It's just beautiful to watch. And I bring this up because, you know, we're getting into now, the Olympics are starting this week, and we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, the beauty of sport is exemplified in the Olympics. I mean, yeah, hockey's a little rough, but really everything else is, I mean, you know, you talk about gymnastics and ice skating. I mean, gymnastics obviously in the Summer Olympics, but ice skating in the Winter Olympics, and there's just beautiful to watch. Even curling is beautiful to watch. I mean, how do they do that? I mean, it looks easy, it's not. But this is also beautiful to watch for a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why MMA is some of the fastest growing sports content on TV, right? If you flip through, like me, if you're like me and you're flipping through, I can't find anything to watch, you're almost always going to find some kind of mixed martial arts going on. And it is beautiful to watch. Now, it's beautiful. Now, my wife would never watch it. She'd say, turn it off. I don't want to see this. But something interesting happened the other night. My wife was gone. It was about 9 o'clock, and I forgot that the kids missed their bedtime. Oh well. And I was flipping through, and I just landed on an MMA fight. I just started watching it, right? Because it was one where it was just getting started, and they were coming into the music, boom, 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 you know, like getting all pumped up, right? And they're making their way into the cage, and my 5-year-old son comes in, and he's taking karate. Yeah. So he loves it. You know, he's the yellow white belt now with a black stripe on it or something. I don't know. I'm terrible at that stuff. But I'm like, oh, Oscar, come on in. These guys are going to do kind of like karate, but kind of other stuff too, right? And then about 2 minutes into the fight, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Because he was like, you know, he was just about ready to fall asleep. You know, he's coming up like 9 o'clock. All of his 2 minutes into this fight, he is wired, right? He's like, what are they doing? Why did he kick him? Why did he knock him down to the ground? That guy's bleeding. He's bleeding really bad. Hey, Dad, they gonna stop the bleeding? Like, I'm like, oh no, what did I do, right? But now, he wakes up the next morning. What do you think he does? Practices and?
Destroyed your furniture.
Well, we're not buying new furniture for years now. This kid's got to work this off. Told my wife. Guess what we watched last night? This was awesome, right? But yeah, and then of course, as he's telling her this, he's going through all the moves like these guys are kicking each other, right? But he's into it, right? And one of the things that he said, it was awesome. It was awesome. And he used that word like a couple times. I'm like, oh my, I've created this monster. And then I kept going back to, thinking that I was going to be talking to you guys today, I kept going back to, well, it's beautiful too. It's like, these moves that these guys make are very structured moves and very fluid. And my wife's like, yeah, it's not beautiful. So the number one reason, what we found, and this goes 12, 15 years of studies now of studying sports fans and their motivations. And by the way, we study sports fans a bunch of different ways. Rhetoricians talk about sports fans one way. People who collect data about sports fans pass out surveys, kind of get all your information and make assertions about fans and why we become fans. They all kind of center back on this idea of identity, but identity with our primary group, right? And here I am in the biggest snowstorm in the 1970s with my Steelers gear on, right? And by the way, my dad and my little brother are standing there, and this picture, I kind of always looked at this picture like, oh my God, this is like they were trying to make me a Steelers fan. This is great, right? This is what they were trying to do, and they were trying to say the whole family identity was wrapped up in this idea of being a Steelers fan. Now, I say that because anybody watch the show This Is Us? I talked about that. Okay. There's only one reason why I watch that show now. There's only one reason why I'm committed to watching that show now. Anybody know why? They're Steelers fans. They're raising their kids in the 70s in Pittsburgh, right? I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like that could be my mom and dad, right? Arguing at a bar, at a sports bar, watching the Steelers, like that kind of, like that's what we were like. We used to spray paint signs and hang them from our porch, we did that all the time. And that's how we celebrated our family. But we watched games together as a family on TV. We talked about it. We had dinners where we talked about football. And it was a big, and not to mention that was also the time that the Pittsburgh Pirates were doing very well. We Are Family, Sister Sledge, Willie Stargell, Dave Parker, the 1970s, a couple of World Series. So that was a big time to grow up in Pittsburgh. And every family, it felt like every family was celebrating around sports and connecting around sports. And so that was really big. Now, something opposite was happening in Cleveland a couple years later, quite a few years later. Their identity was being torn from them. Their identity was being ripped away. And some of you may know what this feels like if you're an Oakland Raiders fan and you live in Oakland, or if you're a San Diego fan and you're living in the Chargers fan and you're living in San Diego. There's a lot of that happens, right? But for Cleveland, there was such an identity in that town wrapped around football that whenever the Browns left or were ripped away from them, there were a lot of people that were angry, including Steelers fans. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but the Steelers and the Browns hated each other for a long time. Still kind of do, but the rivalry is just not the same. It's not what it was, right? And so there were actually Steelers fans and Browns fans standing side by side, arms locked, saying, no, don't take this team away from Cleveland. And the Pittsburgh fans were saying that because that identity, that rivalry, was as much a part of the identity as, you know, what it was to be a Browns fan in Cleveland, right? That was a big deal. So, you know, it didn't last long, and they got a team back, and they were just never the same. But, you know, who knows? But one thing we know for sure is they did keep a fan base, and that fan base is still very loyal. And it's hard to believe after an 0-16 season that people wouldn't. It's funny. If you have Browns fans who are you're friends with a Browns fan, they get on Facebook and they're like, I'm done with the Browns. I'm never going to be a Browns fan again. I'm done. And then they're back next season. Think, oh, let's go Browns. This is going to be the season. We're going to do it this season. You know, there's always that hope, that new hope of a new season. So when we talk about how we measure sports fans and how we learn about reactions from sports fans and respond to those reactions, Brian Sarabian, who I've had a chance to interact with quite a bit, director of social media at the San Francisco Giants, says this quite a bit. Look, I mean, I'll go on social media and interact with sports fans, but if you're going to talk to me about player moves and manager decisions, I'm not the guy. But if you're going to talk to me about hot dogs being cold up in section 103 or a seat that's broken or bad parking, I'm your guy. I'm going to help you fix it, right? And so he talks about a lot about, and actually Brian was really kind of set the tone for how other sports teams interact with fans on social media. And it's kind of blown up into this idea that here are the rules, here are the standards for how we will interact with fans on social media. And there's stuff that you just can't engage with, but there are other things that you can help them solve, help fans figure out. And it's, again, trying to build up that loyalty in a fan base. Here's another quote from the CEO of Synergy, and they're real big in sports marketing. I don't know that this is accurate anymore, or even if it ever was. But I want you to look at those numbers. Do you feel that way? I mean, does it seem to you like that less than 5% of TV is sport, but 50% of what is tweeted about is sport? I guess you have to be on Twitter to kind of really sense that, but I don't get that anymore. And this is from a couple years ago. No? What do you think? Yeah?
I mean, I'd say for the most part, I genuinely believe it's like the community you hang around with, like it's who you're following.
Yes.
Like I follow a bunch, like Bleacher Report, ESPN, so I'm following them, so my feed is constantly sports.
So it might even be more than 50% for you, right? Yeah, because that's all you're seeing. But if you're following politics, for example, then all you're going to see is stuff about Donald Trump and everything else, right? Yeah. So I mean, that makes complete sense. I would even argue that the less than 5% of TV is sport. Man, I tell you, I've got a lot of sport channels. I mean, it takes, and it seems like everybody's trying to get in the game. And now, not only that, a lot of channels on TV, there's a lot of channels other places, right? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I mean, everybody's getting into the game. streaming sports. Amazon, everybody's getting into it. So I bring up these last two slides because these are important in terms of figuring out how to measure this stuff, right? Okay. The other important thing to consider too when you're studying this stuff is try not to think about just American sports, just sports based in the United States. Here's why. I mean, if you look at the social media growth of sports teams around the world, 8 of the top 10 liked teams on Facebook are European football, soccer, right? 7 of the top 10 liked athletes on Facebook are outside the US. 6 of the top 10 followed teams on Twitter are outside the US, and 8 of the top 10 followed athletes on Twitter are outside the US. Pretty amazing, right? So, now, obviously in there somewhere, mixed in there is LeBron James, of course, but really for the most part, these athletes that people are fans of a lot of them are outside of the US. And so there's a whole other world that we really don't examine as much as we probably should. And this is a big reason why. I mean, so Andy Billings, one of our good friends, is the Ronald Reagan something chair, endowed chair of, at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. And Andy does a lot of studies on the Olympics. So if you're interested at all in studying the Olympics, you got to pick up some of Andy's work. Billings is Billings.
And Dr. Devlin.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. See? You have a fan. You have a fan. I love it. But this is a great time to study the Olympics. Why? Because it's happening right now. And you can see a lot of interest in national identity happening right now, right? A lot of patriotism happens in the Olympics, right? So, a lot of celebrating American athletes happens right now. And it's funny because all of a sudden we forget our allegiances to our sports teams that are centered in geographical locations around the country, and we all become fans of the United States Olympic teams, right? And that's very important. So that's a whole nother area that we could study in terms of understanding fan motivation. I'm going to skip over this one. This is a funny take on the rules that they were setting up for Olympic athletes on social media, but I'm going to say that for the talk I'm going to do tomorrow. Or Wednesday. Okay, so why we're fans, why it matters. There's a lot, and I'll kind of wrap up with this. Why it matters, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This idea that you have this built-in sense of community. You're talking about being on Twitter and about the people that you follow on Twitter. I love being on Twitter and getting into sports-related conversations with people I would never otherwise meet. No idea who these people are, right? And so we're chatting back and forth, and that person might be in another country, and we're having a real conversation about what sports mean, right? And what we could study. And we're building that community because of it. There's a thought that sports in the right sense being a sports fan could boost your well-being, whether that's psychologically or physically. There's a part where I say kind of get you out, moving around. I don't know if I have that down here. Oh, yeah, it inspires us to get active, right? So there's that idea that if we see a football game, I always see people throwing the football around at tailgate lots, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually like seeing something happen in a game and it makes you want to get up and go play that game the next day, right? There's a lot of that could happen. Happens a lot in other countries. It happens a lot more in other countries. In South Africa, they go out and play soccer because they are fans of soccer, right? So they go out and play and kick the ball around a lot because they're fans of that. Sports gives us a common language. We can all talk the talk. I mean, there's a lot of words that I threw out today that a lot of you are like, yep, I know what you're talking about because I know that name or I know that sport or I know that play that happened, right? Most of the time it's a safe space. Most of the time sports provide us, it's like there are things that you can talk about with people and there are topics that you avoid, right? Politics, religion, race. Sports is safe for the most part, right? Unless you kind of intermingle politics and race and religion with sports, then it gets a little rough, right? And I think you guys talk about that the third rail of polite discourse in one of your books. I know you did. Communication in sport. Yeah. But this idea that, there's some things you can't talk about, but sports actually is a safe place for us to kind of get together and have fun debates about things, right? I mean, you see that this is what ESPN makes a living off of that, right? First Take, what are the other ones?
Well, I mean, Fox has their own.
Coward and
Countdown. What is it?
The
Undisputed?
Sunday,
No,
the-
not Undisputed. With oh my God.
but I know what you mean. But they're all over the place now, right? And every channel's got them, right? There's all these debates going on. This idea of experiencing success, right? So we get to live vicariously through these teams, these athletes who win, and we feel like we've won. I mentioned that I said Berging. I said you're Berging today by wearing your Fly Eagles Fly shirt, right? And I said maybe you were an Eagles fan too. I didn't. Okay, no, you're just.
He's fan, so it's
There you go. Okay, that worked. But this we bask in the reflective glow of our team's success. That's Berging, right? Versus Corfing. I'm getting some nods because you've heard these terms. Some of you have heard these terms. Corfing is cutting off reflective failure. There are no Patriots gear on today in here. I don't know if you noticed that, right? And we do that, right? We'll say we'll wear that team's jersey. We'll wear those team colors the next day if there was success because we want to celebrate in that success. Inspires us to get active. We tend to communicate more with others when we're fans. We want to talk about sports. And sometimes, and this is where I'm going to kind of wrap up with this. This is my favorite one is to give. You see a lot of this happen where fans come together to give. They come together to support other fans, athletes who have fallen. Larry Fitzgerald does this thing around breast cancer awareness. His mother died of breast cancer. And on Twitter, for every new follower he was giving 25 cents. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it added up, right? So on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, he ended up giving tens of thousands of dollars to breast cancer awareness just because of all the followers he was getting. And that was all of the fans that were coming together to support his cause. And we see a lot of that happen in sports. And I think that's the bright side of sports. I mean, those are the things that we should celebrate and be thankful for. And that's what gets me excited about studying this stuff. So that's it. So thank you for listening. That was an hour of me yammering about fans. And if you have questions, I'll take them. So thank you. Thanks.
We do have about 5 minutes or so for some questions. So if you've got a couple, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about what happens when a team that hasn't won in a really long time finally nabs a championship or something?
So there's this. First of all, there's the good side and the bad side. The bad side is there could be some rioting, looting, things like that. That happens a lot in American culture. Jerry Lewis, not the comedian, but the researcher Jerry Lewis, studied this idea of crowd rioting behaviors after following a championship. And he's got this formula I don't know if you've ever seen this, but he's got this great formula for, okay, it has to be in a major city, it has to have all of these factors. Predominantly males are involved. It used to be predominantly white males, that's not true anymore. And what was the other one? Tense final game, right? Or tense, so if it's a Game 7 series or if it's a Super Bowl, tense, like nail biter kind of game, and then they erupt, right? Now what's weird is what happens in other countries. In other countries, it's after they lose. So Buenos Aires, we saw that happen. In some of the European leagues, we saw that happen. In Vancouver, that happened after the Canucks. But for some reason in the United States, it's after we win, which is weird. But on the flip side of that, there's that final sense of success. Like, it was worth it. After all this time, after being a Cubs fan for all these years, finally the payoff, right? And that's how I kind of felt as a Cavs fan after all that time. So, yeah.
What about, how far would you say that like fandom goes for like athletes that have been tarnished, like Barry Bonds?
Oh,
like set a
that's-
bunch of records, but then found out that he was doping. And
Yeah. That's a great question, and I will tell you that it's a whole other weird set of studies that we do where we don't even look at because what happens? Athletes move. So when Bonds left the Pirates and went to San Francisco, it's like the Pirates fans were like, done. Don't want to. Barry Bonds was a god when he played for the Pirates. When he went to San Francisco, it was like they were done with him. They ripped his posters down. When LeBron left Cleveland, they were burning his jersey. I mean, this happens all the time. So we have evidence to suggest, and this actually comes from my dissertation, that depending on your level of affinity for a particular athlete, you are willing to overlook some behaviors. So not all behaviors. So we for very simple minor behaviors like writing a bad check, jaywalking, things like that. You're willing to overlook those behaviors, but things like rape, murder, like very severe, serious crimes, you can be the most avid fan and you won't overlook those things. And so people will, unless the narrative switches in the media and in the local media, and you then say, okay, well, maybe I'll give this guy the benefit of the doubt, right? And we saw that happen. You mentioned Kobe Bryant earlier. We saw that happen with the Lakers when he was in LA, and the whole narrative switched in LA, but outside of LA, it was like, oh, this guy's a bad guy. And it took him years to repair his image. Yeah. So that's a good question. Lots to unpack there, lots to study there. Yeah.
Got time for one last question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the examination of what, because it says in the brief description of what this speech is going to be about, it's saying you're examining the social utility of being a sports fan.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that utility part specifically.
Yeah, so how we use sports to become better citizens, right? How we use sports through fandom to become better citizens. And that's actually where I was kind of going with Larry Fitzgerald's thing, although we see it in a lot of other ways too. Where we see it kind of manifest itself is in things like the Olympics, so where people come together as a nation. Now, if you talk about social utility in terms of community engagement, Houston Rockets, because I see your jersey back here, your shirt back there, they're a really good example of getting their fans activated on a community level. So they actually take their fans and bring them out away from the Houston Rockets, away from a game, to do things in the community alongside other athletes. And that can only happen because they're fans. Now, they're doing that because they think, well, there's a chance that I might rub elbows with Harden or somebody like that, right? But that idea that gets them out and being members of the community and seeing other people, other fans doing the same positive pro-social things. Yeah, it's a good question.
All right, well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but let's thank Dr. Adam Earnhardt.
Thank you.